Hello YouTube, this is Stone Cabin Adventures. Kevin's behind the camera again, Lorelei out here in front. Welcome back to another episode of Life and Times of Pinky Calhoun. Take just a moment, click the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, click the notification bell so that you don't ever miss another episode of Pinky or with whatever crazy stuff we got going on with animals and the greenhouse outside. So Pinky has decided that she needs to rescue her boss. So she's getting ready to head down in the mine. Mr. Harkin kept his candle stash in the basket with his forks and spoons. I grabbed half a dozen candles and one whole packet of matches. He'd shown off his matches one day in town. I'd seen how he made them work. I told myself I could take them with me in case I might need to relight my candle while I was in the mine. The truth was, I've been coveting Mr. Harkin of his matches. I prayed for God to forgive me for the part of the truth that was a sin, but I still needed to take them with me. Maybe when I get paid, if Mr. Harkin is alive, and if I get paid, I will spend a penny and get my own matches. Knowing I could own an entire package of the fire sticks made me braver. I didn't light the candle until I'd passed the little room with a table and chair. The smoke coming off that match burned my nose something awful and made my eyes water. I nearly turned back. But having a light made the tunnel less scary. I expected the walls to be covered in spiders and webs and all kinds of murky mine creatures. They were mostly covered in dirt and rocks, not even any slime. He'd put up some logs here and there, like halls and doorways. Maybe that's how he thought mine digging should be done. I don't know. Outside of the mine, I'd seen a huge rock pile angling down the hill. Now I realized what caused it. Mr. Harkin had to haul all the dirt and rock that he dug out of the mine outside. It must have been millions of shovelfuls. Just moving those rocks and dirt out of the mine would have been a big job, even if somebody else dug it all up. My opinion of Mr. Harkin went up several notches. I wished I'd brought a candle holder. I sure couldn't hold that candle while it burned down to a nub. I counted to 1,000 and 1,000 again. Before I got to 3,000 steps, I heard a funny sound. I stopped in my tracks. My heart pounded so hard I couldn't hear the noise. Or maybe the noise had stopped. Didn't cougars scream right before they pounced? What if that sound had been a mine creature's version of a cougar scream? I wondered if mines had animals that could swallow little girls. Our river did. Why not this mine? I hoped the deep earth animals were afraid of fire. I hoped my little candle would be enough fire to count. I forgot how many steps I'd taken. That wild creature's noise scared the numbers right out of me. I tried to keep walking, but my feet wouldn't move. My hands shook and shadows danced like slimy demons on the walls. A huge shiver ripped down through my body. Out of nowhere, I felt that fish's tail hit me again. I dropped the candle and it went out. Darkness so black it would eat your soul surrounded me. My knees turned to water and I fell on my behind on that rough floor. I rolled up in a little ball waiting for the mine monster to attack. I knew that every second I waited, the devil got closer to stealing my soul. The strange animals who lived in the bowels of the earth inched closer, taunting me. I hoped the thing would be dry like a lizard or furry like a cougar. I hated the idea of being slimed to death and eaten. When I caught my breath, the monsters lost some of their terror. Besides, I told myself, you don't even know if that monster's real or something you dreamed up from all that reading you do. I sat up. The floor of the mine hadn't been smoothed off like a house or a barn. Rocks had stuck up during my trek this far and tripped me a dozen times a minute. As I started to stand up, I felt a lump press against my leg. A long, hard lump, longer than my hand. I thought it had to be a mine monster's tentacle, and I nearly screamed before I realized it was those candles in my pocket I had taken from Mr. Harkin's house. I felt like such a dafty. I pulled a candle and the matches out of my pocket and lit another candle. This time I lit it careful and didn't breathe that smoke. Nothing around me had changed. I had changed. Part of my fear had vanished. I had been terrified, and nothing happened. Sweat ran down my head and my back. I expected this adventure to be exciting and maybe deadly, not boring. But Mr. Harkin hadn't shown up, and neither had his little leather bag of gold. So I picked up that candle nub that had fallen and walked deeper into the mine. I knew Mr. Harkin had to fight to get his wheelbarrow through some of the tight spots. I had no idea what direction was which. I just kept walking. I hoped I'd find him. I hoped I'd find his hiding place for those shiny discs. I wouldn't dream of stealing them. I just wanted to know something that an adult didn't want me to know. Knowing where they were would satisfy that bit of curiosity. I kept walking and sweating. Sweat ran down my face and dripped off my nose. Ma had braided my hair in a tight circle around my head, but curly wispies had worked their way loose and straggled down my neck. Tiny sweat rivers kept those wispy parts stuck to me and dripping salt water on my clothes. Those sweat rivers felt like little creepies running down my body. Being smart isn't always a good thing. My imagination gets me in all kinds of trouble. Last summer, I found a pregnant rattlesnake and kept that fat mama in a basket with a lid. I put the basket in an empty barrel out in the barn. Every few days, I'd stuff a baby chicken in the basket with her. I'd dunk that basket in the horse trough a couple of times a day so the snake could drink. That snake got madder and madder every minute. She nearly bit me a couple of times. I wanted to keep the eggs and watch them hatch. Bad news. After a week, the basket was full of baby snakes. Rattlesnakes don't lay eggs. They have babies. I told our teacher that rattlesnakes aren't reptiles because they don't lay eggs. He asked me how I knew, and I told him. Rufus called me a liar, but right off he said he was sorry. Then he muttered something about chickens laying eggs and not being reptiles either. I think Rufus doesn't know how to have friends. I had Elmer kill the snakes for me. I barely talked him out of telling Pa. The mine was hotter than working outside in the sun. I was tempted to take off my dress and carry it, but this one buttoned down the back. That's the most ridiculous thing I ever heard of. Parents work to teach their kids to crawl and walk and how to feed themselves. Sometimes they spend months getting a youngster potty trained. Come on, be clever, you can do it. They even teach us to dress ourselves. Then someone decided their little girl was too independent. I know. Let's make her dresses buttoned up the back so she can't dress or undress herself. Like I say, that's just being mean to girls. Dresses that button up the back rank right up there with not letting women vote or be the mayor. No one ever made a boy's shirt button up the back. No, they want their sons to be independent. They want their little girls to learn that they must always lean on someone for something. When I start making my dresses, my own dresses, I'm never buttoning up the back again. I don't want to be the mayor either. Too many people bother you about stuff they should deal with themselves. That's what Mayor Driscoll told Pa when I wasn't supposed to be listening. I think he meant Rufus's pa. I'm not sure I could be the mayor if it means having to be nice to somebody like Mr. Gates. I lost track of how many steps I'd taken. There weren't any wrong steps to take, so I didn't worry too much about it. I reassured myself with the thought, while something niggled at my comfort. Then I remembered the little room with the table and chair. I hadn't seen it while I walked forward, but I'd sure enough seen it when I headed out of the mine. How many more of those were there? Not that I thought he carried a table and chair down here every 100 steps or so, but there could be hidden tunnels that I hadn't seen. I hadn't looked for any. I tried to convince myself that I would find Mr. Harkin and he would know the way out. It didn't work. I kept thinking other bad ideas, like mine monsters had killed him, or the mine had killed him, or I was in the wrong mine and wouldn't find anything except the end of a long and crooked hallway. What if the mine tunnel never ended? That'd be awful. My heart beat a quick thumpity-thump when I saw his wheelbarrow. The pounding in my chest and my ears grew harder and faster when I saw blood all over the barrow. My hand reached up and covered my mouth. Someone had lost more blood than Ma's huge fish had held. Not so much blood as that pig we killed last fall, so maybe whoever's blood had puddled there might still be alive. I kept walking and hoping that I'd find Mr. Harkin and he'd be okay. Dust from the ceiling sifted down onto my head. How long until the whole thing caved in? I didn't know, and I wasn't sure I wanted to know. I had to find Mr. Harkin and get out of there. I wondered how many steps I took in an hour. How long had I been walking? If I took 2 steps in a second, and each step was nearly a foot long, I probably walked a mile in 6,000 or 7,000 steps. It didn't matter. I had no idea how many steps I'd taken or how long I'd been walking. I know that sometimes I had barely inched along. The mine made noises and tried to blow out my candle. It took me a minute to realize light was coming out the side of the tunnel. I quickly blew out my candles and spit on the wick to keep it from smoking. Mr. Harkin had been missing for a couple days. Whoever was in that side tunnel had light. I wouldn't need my candle. I snuck up to the opening and peeked in. I saw him. Then I saw them. Mr. Gates and Rufus stood guard. Letha Gates had a switch, and she hit Mr. Harkin across the face with it. I didn't know why he didn't take it away from her and break it. It took me a long minute to notice that his hands were tied behind his back, and his feet were tied together. If he moved too much, he'd fall. By the looks of him, he had fallen really hard several times. Maybe Mr. Gates and Letha's brother Rufus had hit him. Rufus likes to fight. He's too good at it. I pressed my back against the rough wall just outside that little room and listened. I didn't understand until all of a sudden I got it. My hands flew up to cover my mouth. Mr. Gates wanted Mr. Harkin to marry Letha. Mr. Harkin kept saying that he wasn't the father and wouldn't take the blame. Letha used to cook and clean for Mr. Harkin. She quit working for him is why I got the job. If a 7-year-old kid like me can handle it, she must not have done a good job. I guess she decided if she couldn't have her job back, she'd come back as his wife. I didn't blame her one bit. I'd rather live with Mr. Harkin than with Rufus and their pa. But not the father? What did Mr. Harkin mean? Then realization hit me in the gut like one of Rufus's punches. Letha was going to have a baby, and they wanted Mr. Harkin to be the baby's pa. Lord, were they crazy? He would be a terrible pa. He don't love nobody but his mine. He don't even have a dog. He has chickens for eggs that he eats. He has pigs that he plans to eat. He has a horse to take him to and from town to buy more stuff to eat. If he had a baby, he'd want to figure out a way to get it to make something he could eat. Or he'd eat the baby. He pays me to fix his meals. If I couldn't cook, he wouldn't need me. I turned around and walked out of that mine. It took nearly 10,000 steps. Most of the steps were tiny because I didn't light a match. They'd be able to smell it. I ran my hand down the wall and walked as fast as I could. 100 times I tripped on rocks and fell. My hands were sore and bleeding. I know I tore my dress. I could feel blood trickling down my shins where the floor of that mine tried to eat my knees. Sometimes I had to stop walking and breathe on purpose just to make the pain slow down. Blood ran down my legs and into my boots, and my fingers dripped blood. Pain goosebumps raced up my arms and legs and shivered me to my bones. It felt like forever passed before I could see the evening light coming inside that mine. Just when that hope hit my heart, I heard those awful gates following me. I ducked into the room with the table. I hid where I couldn't see into the main tunnel. I tried to breathe quiet, but every breath sounded like the freight train whistling and rumbling. The Gates family walked right on by. I heard Mr. Gates say, "Another day without water and he'll be willing enough. Don't you fret none. If not, we'll crush his head with a rock and hide him in his mine. No one will care that he died. Then you can tell your story and take over his farm as an inheritance for his child." "But what if the baby looks like its pa?" Letha asked. "You mean red-headed like Calhoun?" "Yep," she said, "red-headed, just like him and his girl." I rubbed a bloody hand across my hair and cringed. Pa and me have red hair. Thank you for listening. Come back next week for episode 5 and find out more about Letha's baby. Like, subscribe, click that notification bell. Come back and visit us often. Love you from Stone Cabin Adventures. Mwah.